Welcome to my channel. I'm Creative Katie Karen Burchill. Today's tutorial, I'm going to take you step by step to create this vintage feel art journal page. And I'm going to be using Pantone's Color of the Year Peach Fuzz. Here's another tutorial using that same color scheme, but a different technique. So this page, I am starting with the color scheme, and then I found this napkin, and I think that it's going to go well. I'm cutting out this quadrant of it, peeling off the excess plies, and now I am going to grab my small liner brush and a little bit of water and water cut away the parts of the napkin that are in the background and parts of the napkin that I don't want on my focal image. So you put a little bit of water on the brush. You do not need much, and you go right against where you want it to cut. Give it a couple seconds and then just easily pull it off. It gives a deckled edge, which hides the line between where the page ends and the focal image starts. So all you have to do is work your way around. Now, the background of this napkin is there's some text there, there's some print, it's colored. So in that case, I want more of it to disappear. If it was white, when you decoupage it down, when you glue it down, that disappears. But because it's colored, it doesn't. So we'll be treating this a little bit different than if this was a completely white background. I'll mention it once we get to that part. So I'm just going section by section, little by little. And no, I'm not going this fast. The video is sped up. But once you get the basics, just keep working your way. Take off what you know you do not want, little by little. And right there, it just looks so much better and is easier to see what your final product is going to look like. Now, this stencil comes from the Crafter's Workshop, and I am going to use some modeling paste from the Crafter's Workshop as well through the stencil. And I love to apply modeling paste with a key card. So I put it on the palette knife and then put it onto the key card and then apply it through the stencil with the key card. That's the way I find the most success. I've got some area here and basically I'm going to set up a triad. Number one is actually the focal image, and then I'm going to put the stenciling or the modeling paste through the stencil in two other places. So there are three areas for your eye to go through. This stencil is called Leafy Fans, and I chose it because it kind of goes with the feel of the focal image that I've chosen. It's floral, but it's got some geometrics to it, which I like. Here I'm putting more on the card with the palette knife and then applying it. Always when you use modeling paste with your stencils, take the time to clean your stencil, clean that modeling paste off. So there it is. And I realized that I want this to go a little bit more, so I dried it a little bit. Now I'm placing the stencil back and I'm going to extend that, just that little bit more. Some stencils are a little harder to find and to put back over, but this one I was lucky and it was quite easy to do. I love adding texture to my page. So now I'm going to colorize this, and I'm using my Inktense blocks. I've swatched them out, and then I'm looking at the colors here. Now I'm going to make that peach fuzz color, and I'm going to use a pink, an orange, and a yellow, and I'm going to mix it right on the page. But first, I'm going to give this a coat of gesso. That's going to help me more easily blend the color mediums. So here it is. And before I put the color medium on, I'm gluing the napkin down with the fluid matte medium. I put a coat underneath and a coat on top. And that footage got lost, but now don't worry if there's a few wrinkles. That's just going to add to the overall effect later on. Now, remember when I said a napkin that's dark, the background is dark, like this one. Why not I water cut to get rid of it? Now, there's little areas in there, and what I've got on my brush here is some white gesso. And I am just putting it right a little bit over the napkin just to meld the napkin onto the page and get rid of any of that background color. It was brown, it looked dirty, it just makes it look messier. And then the center areas where I couldn't cut it out. So back to the coloring. Here's the yellow, and then I'm going to take some of that more pinky red, and then some of the orange. I'm going to spray it with water or put water on my finger and activate it together. Now, Inktense blocks act like watercolor. They're activated with water. But once they are activated and completely dry, they are permanent like acrylic paint. And later on, when you see me doing some things, you'll be glad that it was permanent. I like using permanent color mediums, especially at the beginning of the project. It just allows you a lot more freedom and a lot less oopses when you've added wet medium afterwards and reactivated it. So I'm mixing this right on here. Then I'm adding a little bit of gesso. That's lightening it. So I'm getting some variation, but overall it's very definitely that peach fuzz color, or as close as I am happy with. Adding more color, spraying water, and then when you're putting water on, especially if there's modeling paste, you're going to need to maybe take time to let it dry and then reapply more color. Here I'm building in, some areas are brighter and darker. Here I'm taking the baby wipe and getting it into some of those areas. I just want all the background in and around in between the napkin, as well as all the way around. Now, the reason I didn't colorize this before I glued the napkin down is that if I glued the napkin after I put the color, that peach color is going to come through the napkin and distort the napkin colors. And I didn't want to do that. So now I'm going to colorize the napkin. And how I'm doing that is I'm applying a coat of gesso, and then I'm getting some of the Inktense color on the brush and going over it. This gives a painterly effect. Here I'm mixing some of that olive green with some yellow with the white gesso, and it's beautifully colored. And it looks a little more painterly. There's some coral or peachy color in the middle, so I'm just adding that just to beef it up. So you can change the color a little bit. You can brighten the color. So again, here I'm just adding gesso to parts of the petals. And I'm not even trying to attempt to cover all of the petal. I just want to get some of it, and that's really leads to that painterly effect. If you're not willing to try this, then you can just leave the napkin as it is, and it looks beautiful as it is. I just like to tweak the color and make the focal image stand out a little bit. And once you've done a few, it gets easier. So I hope you give it a try. Here I'm adding some of the yellow, and I'm just tweaking the colors. And I'm not worried if I'm changing the color from the original. No one's ever going to see the original right beside it. So now I'm moving to what I think are, I'm not sure if they're tulips or poppies, doesn't really matter. And I start colorizing it putting the gesso down and picking colors that I think are close, but it's not quite the right shade that I want. I'm trying another color. It's just a little too pink or a little too something. It's just not quite right. So I grab some acrylic paint. So I've been asked, how do you decide if you're using acrylic paint, wash down acrylic paint to paint over painted, or the Inktense blocks? Sometimes it's a matter of what's right there, and sometimes it's a matter of which color palette has the closest color match. Sometimes it's the Inktense blocks, I know that I can get the right colors. Sometimes it's the paint, acrylic paint. So I just continue to work around the page, colorizing using the Inktense blocks and some of my acrylic paints. It's mixed media. Mix it up. My poppies or tulips, the red ones at the top, they've really lost some of their definition, but I'm okay with that. Again, it's very abstract, watercolory look. I think it still looks good the way it is. Adding a little bit of black definition in there. I am looking at the original a little bit to see where some of this definition is. Now I'm going back to the background and I'm going to do some stamping with some script. I like my script stamp. It's a good basic, works for pretty much every background, and definitely goes when you're moving towards kind of a more vintage feel. I'm stamping with black archival paint or ink, and I'm just giving it a dry before I move on. I decide to grab my Harlequin stencil from the Crafter's Workshop, and I'm using white paint. It's a little more opaque than I want. Now here, I am wiping this off. Do you notice that it's not taking off the peach color? That's because the Inktense block that was the color is permanent. It's not going to lift. If you had used watercolor, you may very well have lifted the color and then have to reapply. So I'm just adding some, it's almost ghost-like stenciling here. Just that little bit of something extra that I just like how it looks. One of my favorite things, using white to. Now I'm just going to add some sketchy lines on these tulips, poppies, spring flowers, whatever they are. I hold the pencil or the charcoal pencil quite lightly. I'm not even trying to be very precise here. I just want a little bit of shading with the charcoal pencil. Now, the charcoal pencil is not permanent, so I need to be aware that I'm not going to put any wet medium on top of that. It'll smear and smudge and kind of wreck all the work that I've done. I grab through the garden gate. This one's called light, or the sentiment pack is through the garden gate. These three sentiments are printed on sticker paper. So it's a matter of peel and stick, which I love the convenience of that. So all my sentiments that if you purchase them, you can print them on whatever paper you want, tissue paper, sticker paper. You can even resize them. I was going to put that on the way it was, but I decided I wanted to cut off a little bit more of that white. So stuck it back on the backing, and now I'm ready to put it down. So just peel and stick. How easy. And you can have any sentiment you want. Putting that down. And now the white of that is just a little too stark with my background. So I grab some of that peach color that I did the background, the Inktense Blocks, and I'm just painting right over top of that sticker paper. And it's just melding it with the background. The text still shines through, but you don't have that stark white. It doesn't really belong on the page. Now here I'm attempting something that you rarely see me do, drippage. I've never been able to be successful of it. So here I've taken the Inktense Blocks and gotten a color, put it on the edge, spray it with water so it kind of seeps into all the nooks and crannies of the texture. I always like this look, but I get frustrated because, well, it's very unpredictable and it's messy. But if I don't work it, if I don't do it, then I will never get good at it. I'll never master it. So push through. Liking the look. We've got some darker ones. Those colors are getting caught in that texture, which is a perfect way of setting off the texture. I'm giving it a dry. Now I'm coming back with, I'd have brown acrylic paint that I've thinned down, and then I'm putting it on the edge and letting it drip through there. This is really adding to that vintage, old, faded feeling. The dark color really mirrors or matches the darkness of the poppies that I painted. So I'm liking it. I call this a drippage success. You just spray water, get it to move, lift it off until you get it right. And when you get it where you want it, get that heat tool out and dry it. Now I've grabbed my General's charcoal and I'm just shading around the sentiment. Smudging it up again, adding to that vintage feel, and then I'm edging it with the charcoal. And again, the charcoal pencil is not permanent, but I'm not adding any wet medium anymore. This is kind of a final step. I don't varnish my art journal pages. If this was a canvas, I would spray it with a fixative before I did the varnishing. Add a few more sketchy lines. A little few smudges here and there with the charcoal. Just, again, grunge it up. That's all vintage. Then I decide to splatter with white. Just wanted to brighten it up, which definitely isn't vintage, but I don't know. Would you have left out the white? And then I splatter with gold because, well, I'm addicted to splattering. So we are wrapping up this page using Pantone's Color of 2024, Peach Fuzz. I hope you give this color scheme a chance. Follow the steps, use the stencils and stamps that you have that are similar to what I used, and enjoy the process. Until next time, go get creative.